Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be starting something as opposed to continuing something, because today we are going to be starting on the Horus Heresy series. Yes, I know I've been promising this for probably about 2 years, but I think right now is a good time, so we will get started with everything. So today we will be talking about the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, which did come before the Horus Heresy, but was the catalyst that started the whole thing, so starting here is probably a good idea. So to start, in the beginning, before even the Great Crusade started, was a conflict known as the Unification Wars, which is also known as the Wars of Unification. It was the name for the conflicts on Terra at the end of the Age of Strife. Now, it was led by the soon-to-be crowned Emperor of Mankind, and they aimed to once again unite Terra under one power after 5,000 years of chaos, known as the Age of Strife. Now, its ultimate goal was to create a platform from which the Emperor could launch his Great Crusade to unite humanity throughout the cosmos. Now, this was a time when the Emperor led his Thunder Warriors personally. Now, the Thunder Warriors were his own genetically modified super soldiers and the precursors to the Space Marines. He led these forces against the fractured techno-barbarians of old Earth, allied with a clan known as the Terawatt Clan, who had advanced war machines that aided the Emperor's armies. He spread what has become known as the Imperial Truth across the planet, enforcing atheism and attempting to remove the last vestiges of superstition from the hearts of mankind. Now, there were a few battles in the Unification Wars that I will go through another time. However, I do have a list of nations and powers that existed at the time on Earth. Now, there was an area called Albia. I don't know exactly where that is, but that was ruled by the Warlord clans. There was also a place called Albion, which is based around the historic British Isles. There was also the Archimede Empire, who swore loyalty to the Emperor early and avoided much of the conflict of the Unification Wars. They were monarchical but peaceful, and also had a relatively pure human gene stock, with few mutations or anomalies, so were actually the source of many recruits for the early Legio Astartes program, providing soldiers mainly for the Legion 15, also known later as the Thousand Sons. Even under the Imperial Truth, some superstitions remained in the Archimede Empire, mainly believing in the mystical power of their ancestors and using emblems of their greatest kings as wards to protect themselves from harm. Now, another nation was Boeotia, holding out against the unification for quite some time. On the surface, they actually recognised the Emperor's dominance, but using diplomatic loopholes, the monarchy, in the name of the family Yeselti, was able to keep power in their own hands for over 150 years, saying they would integrate to the Emperor's new forces at their own speed and with dignity. However, the Emperor's patience had a limit, and eventually the Emperor's armies invaded, and the new Thousand Sons Legion was sent to quash their rebellious ways. On a side note, the land was also known for having a very heavy industrial presence and at least one buried shrine to old human gods from before the Age of Strife. Now, there was a place called Ethnarchy, which was ruled by eugenists based in the Caucasus Wastes, which was based on Caucasus itself, which is an area of land between the Black and Caspian Seas today. There was Hid Brazil, which was based in South America, the Pan-Pacific Empire, which was based obviously in the Pacific Ocean. There was Ursh, which is based in Central Asia, the Terawatt Clan, which ruled from the Ural Mountains. There was a Indonesian bloc and a Sargon enclave. Because of all these different nations needing to be united, the combat did go on for some time during the Unification Wars, but eventually did wind up with the Emperor being the sole power on the planet. It also ended up creating a number of military formations as a result of the war, including the Geno 5-2 Chiliad, who I will mention at another time. One of the last warlords to fall during the closing days of the war was Dalmoth Kin. Despite his defeat, the Emperor allowed his descendant, Farum Saishar, to remain within the new imperial government, although the actions of Malkador the Sigillite ensured that Saishar never sat on the Council of Terra. After the Unification Wars came what we all are here for, the Great Crusade. Now, it began in approximately 798 Millennium 30 and continued on to 5 Millennium 31, and it was the first rise of humanity after the downfall of its galactic spanning empire during the Age of Strife. Now, the Emperor was still loosely considered a living person at this time, leading a great crusade out to the stars and reconquered a large portion of humanity's old domains before the Great Crusade ended with the Horus Heresy. Now, in order to achieve his vision, the Emperor created the Primarch Project, using his own DNA as a base to clone 20 superhuman sons to lead his forces across the cosmos. He used the Primarchs also as a template for the gene seeds, which he could use to mutate common men, or children, into superhuman soldiers, in a more controlled way than he had with his Thunder Warriors, who will be mentioned in depth at another time. He managed to retrieve the 20 gene seeds from the Primarchs when the Gods of Chaos managed to discover his project and stole the 20 Primarchs Trademarks, casting them out into the galaxy far from the Emperor's reach at that time. Even with this setback, the Emperor continued with his Legio Astartes program, joining them with the Imperial Army, the Titan Legions, the Legio Cybernetica, the Sisters of Silence, and the Custodian Guard to create the greatest fighting force the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. Now, it was also at this time that the warp storms that had plagued the galaxy for many thousands of years abated due to the birth of the Chaos God Slanesh, allowing the Emperor to begin his plans for his new Great Crusade. To start this, he also provided his new Space Marine legions with the Mark II power armor to assist them in coming conflicts. He quickly conquered the industrial powerhouses of Mars and Luna, and then liberated Jupiter, Saturn and Neptune from their alien overlords. He then left the system entirely after defeating and destroying the false world of Sedna. After leaving Sol, the Emperor's first task was to seek out his lost Primarchs while spreading the name of his new Imperium. Over the next few centuries, he reclaimed his sons, travelling to a vast variety of worlds to discover where they had been cast, and reuniting them with the legions he had created from their genetic structure. Slowly, the galaxy was coming under the rule of the Imperium and the Pax Imperialis. Thousands of worlds were liberated from their tyrannical and false rulers. The religions and dogma that had sprung up in the time since the beginning of the Age of Strife were outlawed, and multitudes of Xenos races were encountered and driven from the realms of man, both old and new. Populations where humanity had fallen into corruption or mutation were mostly exterminated, with only a few stable mutant strains being allowed to survive in the service of the Emperor, such as the Squats, Ogrins, and the Ratlings. Now, the original thrust of the Great Crusade was divided into three parts, one led by the Emperor himself, one by Horus, who was one of the first Primarchs to be found, and one by Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands. As each Primarch was found, they were assigned to their own legion, dividing their legions again as they spread out across the galaxy. Soon the demand for Space Marines was outstripping the supply of them. Because of this, the accelerated gene culture was developed for the gene seed, developing it in a fraction of the time that it usually required to grow. However, this led to subtle flaws in the gene seed, derived from the Primarch's own genetic code, being greatly magnified, leading to mutations and afflictions like the Red Thirst and the mutations of the Space Wolves into Wolfen. Once in full swing, the Great Crusade lasted exactly 200 years, and at the peak there were nearly 4,300 expeditionary fleets travelling across the galaxy, conquering new regions for the Emperor and the Imperium. At its apex was the victory the Emperor and Horus achieved over a massive war of the Eleanor Crusade. After this victory, the Emperor declared Horus the War Master of all his armies, which basically meant Supreme Commander, and returned to Terra to commence his work on one of his most secret projects, which was actually to create his own webway, a human-built webway which could link into the existing Eldar webway and allow them to travel across the stars without the need of starships, which was one of the major causes of death in the Imperium at the time, apart from the wars that they were fighting. However, he didn't tell anybody about this project apart from a few select personnel and parts of the Mechanicus, and so it did lead to many, including his Primarchs who were in the dark about this, having second thoughts about their loyalties, but I will get onto that later. Now, towards the end of the Crusade, there was a political and bureaucratic consolidation. Many of the Emperor's armies were now garrisoned across the galaxy rather than being crusading forces, and some were chafing under these duties after centuries of warfare. A large bureaucratic organisations, overseen by Malkador the Sigillite and the Council of Terra, formed to manage the now conquered new territory. They clashed with the Legio repeatedly, and tensions developed when the legions discovered the Council would rule over them, rather than the legions getting ruling status as conquerors of these worlds. Without the Emperor to keep them in check, the Primarchs' friendly rivalries also developed into feuds, with some Primarchs becoming intolerant of each other, whilst others secluding themselves in isolation like their father. Magnus the Red of the Thousand Suns isolated himself, while Logar of the Wordbearers began worshipping Chaos after clashing with the Ultramarines and Guilliman, whilst Leman Russ clashed with Lionel Johnson and Angron over different matters entirely. Perturabo was shunned and envious of Rorgal Dawn, and Dawn was even attacked by surprise by Conrad Kurz after a disagreement, leaving Dawn injured and unconscious. All this would underline the conflicts in the Horus Heresy in the years to come. Now, there were several noteworthy battles and campaigns of the Great Crusade, which I will go through now, although I will describe in detail another time. The first was the pacification of Luna, which was the first major battle of the Great Crusade. And then there was the Battle of Keelek, which is where the Lunar Wolves exterminated the Keelekid. The Battle of 6319, where Horus brought the world 6319 into the Imperial fold. There was the fall of the Lords of Grandinal, where the 413th Expeditionary Team and Ferrus Manus subdued the advanced human world of Gradinal. There was the Battle of Gyrus Tharavin, where the Emperor Rorguldawn, Mortarion, and Horus defeated one of the most powerful Orc war bosses in recorded history, Garkul Blackfang. Now, there was the conquest of Gelspar, where the Death Guard conquered the world of Gelspar. There was the cleansing of Liran, where the Emperor's children annihilated the Lear. There was Golgothan's slaughter, where the World Eaters battled the Brotherhood of Ruin and Orcs on Sarum. There was the Battle of Gate 42, where Horus led 4 legions in a major assault which saw heavy Raven Guard losses. There was of course the Eleanor Crusade, where the Emperor and Horus defeated the empire of the Orc war boss Urlak Urg. There was the Battle of 4716, where the World Bearers sacked that world. There was the Disparax Conflict, where the Iron Hands and the Emperor's children battled the human Xenos Confederation known as the Disparax. There was the War on Murder, where Horus and Sanguinius battled the Mega Arachnids. There was the Interrex Conflict, where Horus invades the advanced human civilization known as the Interrex. There was the Battle of Davin's Moon, where Horus unwittingly falls into the Word Bearer's trap and falls to chaos. Finally, there was the Auretian Technocracy War, which was secretly dedicated to overthrowing the Emperor by Horus. Now, these were many of the conflicts that happened during the Great Crusade. Obviously, that's not all of them, as that would be a page 1,000 miles long. So that was all I have to say on that area, but I will go into detail about many of these conflicts in later videos. The Crusade ended, as many of you know, with the Horus Heresy. As far as history is concerned, the Horus Heresy began with the virus bombing of Istvan III by Horus, now corrupted by Chaos, signalling his rebellion to the Imperium, although it could be said he may have wanted to keep it secret for a while longer. Now, the Loyalists were called back to defend Terra, but few were able to return before great warp storms arose, cutting off large areas of the Imperium from one another. The Ultramarines fought Cor Ferron of the Word Bearers in the Ultramar system, the Space Wolves sacked the Thousand Suns homeworld Prospero, and the White Scars were bogged down by the Kondorax campaign, as well as the Dark Angels fighting a civil war on Caliban. With the Emperor hidden for some unknown reason, fighting against demonic incursions in the bowels of the Imperial Palace actually, the Imperium lacked solid leadership and began to decline. The brief recovery from the darkness that the Great Crusade offered was gone after the Horus Heresy, and with his interment on the Golden Throne and ascension after his battle with Horus, in the eyes of the Imperium he rose to godhood, and the Imperium of Man began to slowly slide into war, decadence, slavery, violence, and destruction for the next 10,000 years. So that's the end of my video on the Great Crusade. Next up will be some of the conflicts I mentioned today, and we will continue on to talk more about the Primarchs, the Legions, the Emperor, and then go into a little bit more about the battles of the Horus Heresy before rounding everything off. If there's anything you specifically want to see a video on, do let me know in the comments section below. Relating to the Horus Heresy, of course, I will be doing Xenos and Chaos specifically at another time, don't worry. And also, if you have any comments for me that you want to ask directly, you can either send me a personal message or you can just ask in the comments section below. And you can also go to the Vox Relay, which is the Vaults of Terra forum, which is undergoing a little bit of maintenance at the moment, but will be getting up and running soon, I hope. And there you can ask lore questions to the community. So that's everything I wanted to mention today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.